Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another podcast, another Trend in Mind conversation. This evening, we launching a new series under the title "The Eighth Question." So for those of you who are going to join us this evening, welcome aboard. For those of us who will be watching this broadcast after, please do stay with us. Make sure you watch it through. Be feel free to comment. All right. This is the Trending Mind. We have a great program for you, and as always, we've got a truly remarkable panel, and we can assure you it's going to be a fun, informative, and a great conversation this evening. So please stay tuned.
What is knowledge? And how much of it must we acquire in order to better our lives? What makes some forms of knowledge seemingly more advantageous than others? What fuels this desire to learn and to know and to understand? And how much of what we learn is actually applied to the bettering of our lives? Is it necessary to know in order to grow? Join us, a group of former Guyanese high schoolers and our special guests, as we chat about the things we need to know and about education and the process of learning in the tech age. This is the Trending Mind, Friday evenings at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on Facebook and YouTube.
All right, welcome aboard. And Dr. Blackman, nice of you to be here. Nice of you to be joining us. All right.
We need to convince me that I can make my class a little early and a little early.
Okay, thank you, Renita. All right. Now, the focus of the eight question conversations, we want to explore the Guyanese mind. We want to delve into it. We want to see if there's anything that we can work out. I was speaking to a friend earlier, and I will quote him. He says, "Guyana is a special place, and the people is a whole nother story." I, I don't know if the person with the quote wants to own it, but we want to delve into the mind and figure out who we are. So I start with you, Antoine. Someone comes from some alien place and they ask you in one sentence, describe the Guyanese people in one sentence. How would you describe the Guyanese people?
I was going to tell you call name and plenty we gonna whistle. But I would seriously though. Guyanese people are known to be extraordinarily hospitable. They are a hospitable, open, friendly, warm people.
Okay.
But I think that has been changed over the years, the last several years. There's still some warmth and hospitality, but I think that has changed a little bit. Where Guyanese in Guyana have become Americanized. America has corrupted Guyana more than the British had.
All right. In one sentence, Randy Ann, who are the Guyanese people? Or how would you define the Guyanese?
I would define Guyanese as very agile and adaptable people that tend to adjust, adapt, and to make do with almost any situation that comes their way. So I would consider, in one word, I call them agile. They adapt and they adjust as Anton said they could actually take on somebody else's culture, or they could keep their culture, or they could create a culture between any other culture and make a combination of cultures that work for them. So I would consider my people very adaptable and agile. Sometimes too docile.
Okay. Misha, the Guyanese people in one sentence. Who
I
are
think
they?
we're unassuming, loving people. Do not test the love, because that's where the unassuming comes in.
Okay.
Because they can switch at the drop of a dime.
Okay, interesting. Dr. Blackman, the Guyanese people in one sentence.
I don't know you could sum up the Guyanese people in one sentence, but crazy Guyanese. Yeah, it's a hard. I mean, I just had the thought that we're African, we're Indian, we're indigenous Amerindian, we're European. Our DNA is a very special thing, and it leads to a very interesting and at times crazy culture. And I think we see that every day. I have a friend who says, Guyana is like a man with, like these things in your pockets you call fobs. He said Guyana is like a man with fobs in fobs in fobs. You could never ever know exactly what's going on at all. So, that would be my thing.
All right. You're watching The Trend in Mind, and we're starting a series of conversations on the title, The Eighth Question. And we're going to try to figure the Guyanese mind. The person, our guest of honor this evening, who we pre-taped, is attorney at law Nigel Hughes. And we'll be posing 8 questions. We'll be playing those questions one at a time, and our panel will respond. And please feel free to comment as we go along. All right. So here is Nigel with his introduction.
By the way, I'm a Guyanese guy, grew up in Guyana for my entire life, and then went away to the UK to study, came back, been practicing since as a lawyer, came back since 1988. I've been in Guyana, I've seen all its iterations. In terms of my personal preferences, I'm an outdoorer. I like hiking, trekking, climbing mountains, huge jazz fan, really huge. I'm actually in mourning since the St. Lucia Jazz Festival has ceased to exist in its original format. Married to a very committed Guyanese woman. Delved in politics for a couple of years, departed from that 2016, and looking on at Guyana, not in its best state at the moment, unfortunately, not in its best state. I don't know what else I should say. I didn't introduce myself, but that's where I am. I practice in Guyana. I have a commercial and criminal practice. I am the managing partner of one of the largest firms in the country. I live in Georgetown.
Okay, you're a GT guy.
I'm
a true GT guy.
I'm a GT guy with very strong Berbice roots. My father came from Berbice and inculcated in us.
Barbician, he's rapping, right?
Yeah.
All right, Anton, I'll go to you quickly. Tell us, is there anything distinct about the quality of a Bobician who eventually grows up in Georgetown?
I've known Nigel for several years. What I did not know is that his family is originally from Berbice, as I am from New Amsterdam. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, were from a town on East Bank, Berbice River, called Islington. So I was born and grew up in New Amsterdam, and then I moved to Georgetown. I think one of the interesting things I think about Barbicians is that we are very much people of the soil. We are more agrarian, and we are also, you can tell very distinctly by the accenture that we use, including some of the Creole truncations, with what parts of the Quarantine, the Berbice region we're from. So you can easily tell somebody from Springlands, from somebody from Blackbush Polder, from somebody from Shitanka, from somebody from West, from Rosignol, or Number 5, or Belldrum, or Hope Town. So it's easy to distinguish. But I think Barbicians are people of the soil, like I said. And what is particularly interesting about Barbicians is that we carry in us, I would say, the fire, the historical fire, as well as the intergenerational trauma from our experiences as being slaves under the Dutch. Because the Dutch rule in Berbice, in the Berbice region, was pretty cruel. And for Barbicians to have survived that kind of brutality from the Dutch, particularly the Dutch, means that Barbicians also possess a strong resilience.
Okay, thank you so much for that. We're moving on.
All right, so we'll delve in to the first question. As you look back at your own experience, what conditions would inspire a child to follow in the parents' footsteps? And had the late senior counsel Clarence Hughes been the head of an accounting firm or the CEO of a medical center, could you likely have been a certified public accountant or the head of surgery somewhere?
The first part of your question, what would inspire? A good example. I think and I say this every day, I am really blessed to have had the parents that I had. I suppose everybody says that, but I really do. I really do appreciate that because in so many ways, well, not in so many ways, I stand on their shoulders. I wouldn't be anywhere close to where I am without their shoulders. So I stand on their shoulders. Two, unlike a lot of other people, before I was born, my father knew he was getting a boy. I'm the first child, and he knew that all his children, he had that ambition that all his children would turn lawyers.
Really?
So, yeah, and he was an alpha male. So, literally, as I came out screaming from the womb of my mom, it was, you're gonna be a lawyer, look, a lawyer. And he had a law firm. He was successful, and I would be in every stage from before common entrance. I knew when he started as a tenant in the building where he was. I knew when he bought it. So every stage of my dad's life, even up to his last years, of all the children, I think I was particularly fortunate and privileged to have been in every part of his life. My room was right next to his. And so more than my siblings, I suspect I probably had the advantage of him. So given my father's personality, if he was an accountant, I probably would end up as a CPA. And if he was a doctor, given what he created in the environment, I probably would have ended up as a doctor, I suppose.
Wow. But so you just went along with that because you respected your father, loved your father, and went with his alpha male. You call him an alpha male.
Well,
so
it's
did
not
you want to be something else though?
Okay, so let me say this. My sister, who is perhaps the most rebellious and strongest in spirit of us, cut a deal with him. She did the law degree, but she wasn't going to practice the law. And by the time she finished beating him up, by the time my brother came, he became an engineer. So he didn't become a lawyer, and he was my parents' brightest child. So he became an engineer. So it's not a case where I gave in and I didn't fight back. I just knew that that was going to be my responsibility. I had to carry that for the family, and I just assumed in the early days that was my my responsibility. I got selected. This was the one that I got selected to do. I'd have to carry this on for the family, and I took it on. And by the time, I suppose I started to question that. I figured, well, maybe I have some talent in this area, so I continued with it. If I wasn't going to be a lawyer, I probably would have been, I'd have been an artist or a musician. And the problem with that is that you don't always make it as well economically.
Exactly.
As an artist and a musician. So. All
right. Dr. Luard, the family dynamics there is very, very interesting. So give me your reaction to that. Here, he describes his father, he describes his dad as an alpha male. He's the eldest son. The dad wants, would prefer that everybody follow in his footsteps and enter the legal field. He does so, Nigel does so. The sister after him decides, okay, I don't want to do that, but I'm gonna meet you halfway. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get that degree, but then I'm gonna do my own thing. And then the third person comes along and does his own thing. As you look at it, as an educator, tell us what you think was happening through the from the eldest kid to the youngest in this Guyanese family setting.
Okay, so a lot of things I thought about as I listened to Nigel. The first thing that caught my attention was the fact that he said he saw his father from a very young age do certain things. And I know research has said that the things that you expose children to very young tend to be their choice of career. So, especially if you keep at it. So I know my husband used to fall asleep with my son on his chest looking at soccer. And as two educators, my son would say right through until we drilled it out of him, he wanted to be a soccer player. He wanted to be a soccer player. And I guess if he was not asthmatic and we pushed him in soccer, that's where he'd go, right? The next thing I thought about was the firstborn and the expectation that was carried as a firstborn in families, the British kind of family, where a lot is put on the firstborn because you become the example for the others, which is a lot for kids to carry. And we did it with grace and pride, but it's really a lot because you take on a lot of responsibility and it's unnecessary, right? You take on the responsibility of whether your parents say to do it or not, it's a burden that is put on you. So, those were a few of the things that were going through my mind. And as an educator, I think Nigel did what he had to do. I think he had some talent in that area. Sometimes destiny finds you, because that's what happened in my case. My mother wanted me to follow in her footsteps. I didn't want to. I went from medical technology and I went to research. I came here and I did research, and then I ended right back into teaching. I know she was the happiest person. And that was a career that I hated. I don't understand how people became teachers. So, right? So destiny's upon so far.
The destiny could do that. All right. You're watching the 8th question on the trending mind, and our guest of honor this evening is attorney at law, Nigel Hughes.
How much does a particular school environment impact on our growth and our eventual social outlook? Start by telling us which high school or school you attended, and if you think it would have made a significant difference in your life journey.
I think school is, certainly for me, school was absolutely critical. I was privileged at every level, at primary, secondary, sixth form, and university. I went to St. Margaret's School when Mrs. Hunter had it as a private school. And it's interesting. At St. Margaret's, we had every possible color under the sun in the same classroom. We did Mrs. Hunter, even though she, well, I don't know how many people know Mrs. Hunter. She appeared Caucasian. And it didn't matter. She treated everybody the same. And that experience, I would not change for the world. People say that it was a privileged school. I wouldn't seek to challenge that, but I will say that my experience at that school, unbelievable, excellent. When I finished common entrance, my father had an aversion to Queen's College, so my first choice was Saints, and I went to Saints after common entrance, and I stayed at Saints until 5th form. I had a great time at Saints. I was champion athlete. I got out to the school. I topped the school at O levels. Sorry, brought second. I think Paul Herwood was number 1. And because the subjects that I wanted to do were not available at Saints at 6th form, I went over to Bishops for 6th form. Now, the Bishopians will say that they took a rough diamond and polished it. I will say that my experience at Bishops was life-changing. It was absolutely unbelievable. Made some lifelong friends there. And 6th form had people coming from other schools into Bishop 6th form. So Anande Trotman, for example, came to 6th form. And we had a very special 6th form. Terrence Campbell, very successful guy. And his businessman was there. Karen Davis. I can name, Ramatar, people who did extremely well in 6th form. And from 6th form at Bishops, again, I was lucky. I did very well. I think 1 or 2 got first and second Bishops. Would have got to Ghana, but again, my father had an aversion to those things. And then I went to University College London, where I read my first and second degrees. I did my first and my master's at University College London, then went to law school for a year. I did pupillage for a year in England and then returned to Ghana in 1988, where I've been since.
Terrence, as an old boy of QC, what do you think could make a Guyanese dad have an aversion to sending their son to Queen's College? What could have been happening? What kind of experience could have led to that?
That's a hard question for me to answer. I would want to say that everything about Queen's College was positive, and no, that's not true. I think the person that Nigel Hughes is perhaps a function of his father's understanding that some place like Queen's College, because it was steeped in, a certain kind of colonial ethos and would go towards not having him be as independent as he needed to be. Would go to him not developing a certain kind of stance that would put him, closer to the people as opposed to closer to the elite circles. Right. I think I would assume that a father of the type that he's just described would be someone who's looking down the road and saying, I want my son to not, just simply slavishly adhere to these codes that these people have put in place in this, and perhaps the better place for him to be would be on the outside looking at it. He'll be fine, as he indicated. He's smart enough. He'll be fine. He'll get through all the things that need to get done, and so that would give him the sort of perspective from which to view the society. So I see that more as a father looking down the road and saying, this is the perspective you need in order to. I would see that. Similarly, I say similarly for, our experience. Say, for example, as folks from Guyana who come to the United States who are, Afro-descended. Sometimes we have to make a choice about the kinds of institutions that we send our children to, and I for one have often thought that, rather than your son going to college at SUNY Stony Brook, it would be better for him to go to Howard, or it would be better for him to go to Morehouse, or, you know, to make a choice about what's an appropriate thing for the particular society in which, and for the ambitions that you have for the child. So I can see the father's choice, but I'll say that, but I'll say privately something else.
Renita, would you have ever, you know, come across that kind of situation where, you know, a particular parent had an aversion to one of the top schools, and so, you know, the child's life took a whole different course?
Typically, for someone to have an aversion to something, they must have had an unpleasant experience or knowledge about something, or they would prefer that their child have a different outlook and a different balance to bring to the table. So for his father to have had an aversion to QC, I am not sure what would have happened and why a parent would have an aversion to the so-called top school in the country at the time. But also, I think a parent knows their children, know what environment they can blossom and perform and excel in, and would try to give that guidance so that their child could have the best advantage possible. So given those ideologies, I think parents would make certain decisions. In my day, I'll use myself as an example. St. Rose's was my school of choice. However, at the time I wrote Common Entrance, the multilateral school was just completed and we had just moved to South. My dad used proximity to the home to send me to that school. So it's different. And it was brand new. It was well equipped. We had most of our teachers were from abroad, the countries that helped build the school, Canadians and stuff like that. So they took a lot of things into consideration when they chose to send me there, disregarding the other schools were there, were established, were notable schools, and were quote unquote some of the top schools. So to me, it depends on the parent at the time, why they make certain decisions to send their kids to certain schools. Again, I will just close with saying, I'm not sure what experiences or what Nigel's father had against Queen's College to have had an aversion to it. But obviously, his vision paid off and his decision paid off.
Right. Okay. All right. Nigel continues with his life.
And you think that has really helped in your journey?
Oh, yeah.
Who that you've been to?
Yeah. I was at Saints when Rodney was very popular. We used to get away from school and go and listen to Rodney. Rodney, I think, is one of the greatest political educators in my life. So you never left a Rodney meeting without learning something and understanding the context in which the country was at the time. So I certainly would say that was an excellent experience. Guyana was in turmoil. The level of political debate was a lot different to what it is today. So yeah, I would say that school, and we had, I was very privileged. We had some fearless teachers. So I had the Jesuit priests amongst my teachers for 5 years at Saints. And I never forget this image. We had a French teacher called Father Rigby, very tall, slim guy. And the riot squad was standing in Brickdam firing tear gas because they had some sort of military exercise. And that tear gas drifted into Saints in the middle of exams. Yeah, and of course everybody panicked, jumped over the back fence and what have you. And I'd never forget the image, Father Rigby walking up the middle of Brickdam, straight towards these soldiers who were all heavily armed, in uniform, gas canisters, And to see this tall, slim Caucasian guy fearlessly heading up to them, unbelievable. It was such an exercise in bravery and courage at the time. So, you know, I've been very, very lucky in that sense.
Antoine, what can you tell us about the mindset of the Jesuit priest? You know, you have first-hand knowledge of that.
Actually, I was impressed to hear Nigel mentioning Father Rigby. I know him as Fred. It was Father Fred Rigby. Father Fred Rigby was a gentle man. He was quiet, he was soft-spoken, and he was really and truly one of the things that I think I was listening to Nigel talking just now, and I was thinking about the Jesuits. And I thought to myself, what is it that brings these men who are experts, high intelligence, driven men to give up everything to follow a belief, a faith, and then have that be an additional driving force for them? I think Father Rigby, as Nigel is describing, confronting or heading towards the military or the police or the soldiers who were throwing tear gas and so forth, is one of fearlessness. Because from the Jesuit perspective, the founder of the Jesuits was a soldier who was injured in battle with a cannon shot to his knees. And he recuperated in a castle, and there he came across The Imitation of Christ book, and then started reading the Bible and got this huge conversion. And so the Jesuits are called the soldiers of Christ. They are the teachers, the soldiers. They are the force that the church unleashes to provide education and teaching. And so that's the kind of thing that Fred Rigby would have embodied as he would have been walking up Brick Dam towards the soldiers. This kind of fearlessness is that, how dare you interfere with or attempt to disrupt what I am trying to do, which is educate and teach younger minds, when all you seem to be wanting to do is to destroy these minds. You know what I'm saying? And I think he knew that by his solitary action, his solitary act of protest, that he had the entire Catholic Church behind him. He had the entire Jesuit order in Guyana behind him. And he had the entire Catholic community in Guyana behind him. And dare anybody do anything to him, compared to what was done to Father Dark, who was stabbed to death, actually right almost outside of Saints on Brick Dam by this guy, this escaped criminal who came to Guyana and started up his House of Israel people. Okay? So Father Dark and even Father Dark embodied that same kind of fearlessness, same kind of intrepidness, if I can make that into a transit. But even Father Dark embodied that in his photography, that he would fearlessly go where he don't care. I need to get this shot. And so I think for Jesuits, those who are really and truly committed and believe in what they're done, driven, there's nothing stopping them. And I think one example that we can look to the work of the Jesuits, it's a little skewed, is that film with Jeremy Irons in The Mission. There are problems with that film in how the Jesuits interacted with the indigenous Indians in Paraguay, but the same kind of driven, almost obsessive, militaristic nature behind them.
Okay, thank you for that, Antoine. You're watching The 8th Question, and this is the Trending Mind.
Would the teenage Nigel have been defined as a GT sweet boy? And would he have been okay with online dating?
Okay. Online dating, I don't have I don't imagine Nigel as a teenager would have had a problem with it. I mean, I would have had a preference for interpersonal reaction. But I don't think I would have had a problem with it per se. I doubt it.
Okay.
And
but Nigel, because boy. Okay, well, I probably heard my story wrong, but we'll move on. And then you mentioned earlier about liking the outdoors. So I like you said, I assume the teenage Nigel would not have necessarily want to be cooped up in a house on a computer or a tablet.
No, actually, no, quite the contrary. Actually, I discovered or became an outdoor person after I came back, because growing up, I had never seen kiteshore before I went away to study. I had never seen the Rupununi before I went away and came back. So as a kid growing up, I was we would call it typical GT teenager. So I would have been, the nightclubs, the parties, you study, you go out, you're running behind the girls. So I wasn't a big outdoor person. My brother was a scout, and he was far more outdoors than I was in teenagers. But I wasn't an outdoor person at all.
Oh, okay. You see what caught you just now? You still running around the girls.
No.
I catch you.
I will be the first to confess that I ran behind the girls, but I wasn't a sweet boy.
Okay. Okay.
Michelle, how would you define if somebody spoke to you, asked you to look back at your time? What was the typical GT girl like? How would you describe a typical GT girl?
I think we were models in our own right. I think the average GT girl had a very nice shape. It was all about the small waist and the big hips, and
You got Terrence smiling there, Michelle.
Yes. And your hair is full and balanced, and you have this nice hair, and and you walk with that spunk. In my time, I remember the movie Sparkle, and wanted to be like the star in Sparkle. So when you step off, somebody's supposed to chase you. They're supposed to come behind you. And if there's some popularity around you because of the things you do, it is expected that, the guys are supposed to chase you. You could do things, you could do fun things, but they are, you got to look good still as a girl when I was growing up. And the thing is, we didn't have much, I didn't have much, but we made do. I usually tell my students about this time, and I will leave the guy's name. I won't say his name because he's still alive. He's still around. And I won't say where. Anyway, we were going to Woodbine, and I had such a great shape that I could take a skirt and wear it as a topless dress, right? So you get the slit from the long skirt, it becomes short. But I needed to do some adjustments to it, and it was with red thread. And it was a black dress. So I did it, and then, the innovation, I inked it in, and then I put my nice bolero over it, and we're dancing and it's sweating. And when I looked at it, I blame my expense, because, it looked good because you got shape, right? So I said, oh my God, you buy this thing and don't tell me it's running? Oh my God, what's wrong with these people? As expensive as this thing was, it's running. I was so embarrassed, but I couldn't confess to making it. So I blamed this designer who made this thing and the cloth. So yeah, but you had, regardless of what, anything looked good on you because you had a good shape, as a young girl in there.
Right. One of you, Petal Daniels Kendall, she's saying the average GT girl, hair welcome, smells sweet, clothes neatly pressed, and you're making enough styles.
Yeah, make the same styles like the book. When you finish making it, who could tell? And listen, we had our own designers. We came here and we buying clothing now made for everybody. We had our own dressmaker, our own hairstylist. We didn't know how privileged we were, designer clothing every time.
Right. All right. You're watching The Eighth Question on the Trending Mind, and our guest of honor this evening is attorney at law Nigel Hughes. Please continue to like and to share the broadcast.
If you were to identify one of the fruits grown in Guyana as a national fruit, what would that be and why?
As a national fruit, do we have a national fruit? What would it?
If you were to identify one,
I suppose I would probably select the Buxton Spice mango, because it was the sort of thing that you grew up with. It, you'd eat it over the sink or over somewhere, and it was so sweet, and the experience was forgive the pun, luscious. Yeah, I probably, if I had to pick, it would be the Buxton Spice mango, as opposed to any mango. It probably would have been that. Tamarind and salted pepper. I'm not sure, but probably the mango.
Okay, you said tamarind, salt, pepper, Buxton Spice. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Have the juice running down. Have you ever, as a child, did you mash it up? So sometimes it comes hard in the Buxton Spice, but sometimes we had a way of softening it and really
and then you cut a little hole and suck
and then you, oh my goodness, yes.
Absolutely.
Terence, you would go with that if you were to select a national fruit for Guyana.
Actually,
you would go with spice.
I was smiling because I did not have a stomach for mangoes. So actually, mangoes is one of the fruits that I can't eat a lot of. I could, particularly the sweet ones. So I would prefer the mangoes, the green ones with salt and pepper and so on. But I can't eat the sweet ones. So I was laughing.
Right.
Even now I can't. When I buy the mango juices or something like this, it's a challenge for me to drink. Yeah. So that's
an interesting condition.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My national fruit would have been a guava or something like this.
Guava,
one of those ones with the pink ones inside. I like those.
Right. Yeah. and definitely the ones without the worms, right?
And definitely do. But sometimes we pick them up off the ground and eat them with worms too. So you don't know until it's in your mouth and you're chewing it up, and then you realize things are bad, and you don't have a choice at that moment. You continue.
All right, let's continue with Nigel. 2 women in my life. One of them got to be my wife. Betty loved me, but I love Myra. I gone and I explained to Grandpapa, what should I do? Who should I wear? Grandpa watched me and shaky here. He said, the one that you love, never marry to she. Is the one who loves you. She gonna make you happy. Keep the one that you love on the side all the while. But the one that loves you, take her straight down the aisle. What's that song advice? As you look back at your own life experiences.
I don't know that I have the experience to be able to respond to that question, but I certainly think it's a privilege if you find that happy spell in that Sparrow scenario. I suppose the advice that was given was probably the best you find, but that's only from a particularly selfish point of view. I think ultimately in life, what you look for is to find someone like you that you both love each other equally, and that you could make it work.
Right. So you're not too much into this young lady's going to love you. So you're going to may not have any problems with cheating, etc., and
I think a lot has changed. A lot of the things that we took as for granted as standard are no longer standard or relevant. So, that kind of comparison, I think when Sparrow did it, might have been relevant to the time, because a lot of the stuff Sparrow did, you can't play today. I mean, that's true. I mean, a lot of it is that track you did where you bust up the eye and proves up the knee, and then that's completely unacceptable. So in the context of the time, where the choice was really, in the Sparrow put it between marrying somebody you love rather than somebody that loves you, or whoever loves whichever one more. I think a lot of that has changed. I think our options have changed. We realize that we can have a win-win situation rather than attempting to have. So that would be my response to that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Rennie, and I mean, you have daughters, but let's say you had a son, and his grandfather gave him that advice. He says, keep the person, keep the woman that you love. You could keep her on the side and thing, but the one who loves you, she's going to make you happy. As a woman, would you agree with grandpa's advice?
Well, I'm gonna have to confess something. God rest my mother's soul. She's passed on. My mom always said, marry the guy that loves you. Marry the guy that loves you. I guess
not the one that you love.
Not the one that you love. The one that you love will give you heartaches, issues, etc. And I don't know if she was speaking from experience.
Or the Sparrow. I think she used to listen to Sparrow.
Oh, she listened to Sparrow. So I would kind of agree with Nigel's view that I would prefer it to be all things equal, 50-50. They both should love each other equally. And I find if both parties love each other, it tends to work out. And the loyalty, the respect, the faithfulness and stuff will come up, will be there. Because I don't know how you could just love somebody, marry somebody who loves you and you have no feelings for that person. I don't know how things will work. I've never been in that situation where, you just marry somebody because they love you. So I really don't think I'm qualified enough to say that. Again, I don't know why my mom said that, but I think old-fashioned, both parties should love each other. Both parties should try to work things out. If things, if issues come up, compromise. And then if it doesn't work, then you agree to go your separate ways. But I think, relationships should be based on love from both parties.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Rennie. What is that one perception that Afro-Guyanese need to change, and that one perception that Indo-Guyanese need to change, so that that just might lead to better race relations?
Wow, we're dealing with perceptions here. There's so many perceptions that are misconceived in relation to what both sides perceive the other to be. The question is which one of them would be the most egregious, or the one that you require to change. I can't speak to the perception, all the perceptions that the Indian people have of Guyanese, because I don't think I'm qualified to speak to that. But in terms of what would be considered more not popular, prevalent misconceptions that African people have of Indian people is that that their societies are closed and that you can't enter it, or that you can't participate in their cultural practices. That I think that perhaps is something that we can certainly look at. I can't, like I said, I can't speak about Indian perceptions of Africans.
Okay, I got that.
I have an idea of what they think about us, but I don't know enough to be able to say that this is the most egregious.
Right. You don't necessarily feel it to be accurate, given
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for what they feel about an African.
Right. I get you. But so on the African side, you're talking about that they're not necessarily this closed off people that some Afro-Guyanese Sea.
Yeah,
Democracy.
yeah.
Okay.
But having said that, there's a lot of work that has to be done. I think our race relations are poor, really, really poor, awful.
Okay. So generally, all wrong. If you were to look at that, just adding to that question, then, okay, you've looked at it, you say, okay, it's poor. What would be, in your view, the first step towards bridging that gap, towards bettering the state of affairs?
It's a bit like Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. You got to say, my name is Nigel Hughes. I have racial prejudices, but I want to talk about it. So we have to start with an admission that we have a problem. And I mean, the Guyanese society has to start with that. We have a problem, and that problem is based on race, and it's based on perception, and that we are prepared. We acknowledge that the country can't move forward unless we begin to acknowledge the problem and then address it. So I think my recommendation would be that we first of all admit that there's a strong race problem in Guyana, and that we appreciate that without addressing it, the country won't go anywhere, and that we, in the circumstances, will resolve at every level to attempt to address it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Antoine, your take on using the AA approach to starting to address the race issue, meaning that we start off by admitting, hey, we have a race problem.
I got a feeling this is a setup question. Because as soon as you ask the question, Michelle start laugh. And Terence, Dr. Blackman, turned his face to one side. So I believe I getting set up here.
No.
Actually, I do admire Nigel's response. Because Nigel has provided a response that is steeped in history. And it's steeped in a lot of work that needs to be done, that has to be undone and done.
Yeah, that's what
I think that when we talk about race relations in Guyana, I'm listening to Nigel as an attorney, and I'm thinking, why didn't he mention that the Guyana government, the Parliament of Guyana, as a first step, needs to institute a race and reconciliation commission. That's the first thing. Because what the Race and Reconciliation Commission would do is systematically examine the places, the wheres, and the hows, and the whys racism permeates the entire country. And through the Race Commission would be able to begin the work, at least on one level, of righting or addressing some of the wrongs. But I think on another level, which I'm interested that he did not mention that, is that perhaps the Parliament needs to consider repealing some of the colonial era laws that continue to drive Guyana's understanding of themselves and how they operate, because those colonial era laws have so contaminated the very fabric and infrastructure of the country that even down to until a few years ago, you could not go into a ministry or a government building wearing certain types of clothes or dress certain type of way. I mean, that is rank colonialism, brazen stupidity. That a farmer is coming from the depths of the Borbis River to come and take care of some business at a revenue authority. And all he can jump and put on is a short pants, a singlet, and a slipper. You can tell this man who traveled hours that he got to go and get a shoe and shirt and pants and put the shirt in the pants and come back. So that kind of colonial mentality has so contaminated the country that doing like what President Kigali, many who have criticized him and some rightly so. But on the flip side, what has done in Rwanda is one of the first things they did is repeal a number of the colonial era laws and instituted laws that were more representative of the people of the country. So the Amerindian Act, for example, should be strengthened so that the building new yachts in Guyana or providing new yachts would restrict those yachts from sailing up and down the creek and the rivers that will then damage the mangroves and the riverbanks and cause a lot of the Amerindians who use the Corial to travel to prevent them from upturning and drowning. That's where you need to see proper decolonialization. So I think addressing the issue of race in Guyana, yes, we need a race commission, but we also need the laws because Guyana operates on these colonial era laws, which stifles people, stifles entrepreneurship, it stifles creativity, it stifles everything. But then you also have to address it from a cultural perspective. You have to address it from the perspective of, is it necessary for me to tell you good morning and good afternoon? Good morning and good afternoon is a colonial, is a white man's construct. Who tells us that that is a construct of politeness or manners? Whose manners is it? How did our ancestors greet each other? You understand what I'm saying? That Bob Marley sang about it. Oh, you know, the colonial mentality that we still possess. We may be independent, but independent from what and from whom? That aren't we still in some ways colonialized?
All right. So you're saying we start at the courts. We start with the law. But what about his point where he's saying, you know, we as a people need to first admit that, hey, we do have a problem, which, you know, some may or may not want to really.
No, Andy, I agree with you. That's a step. And that is part of the process of culture. But to set that example, let Parliament remove the colonial era laws. Let the race commission set up and say, well, we will start having these questions answered. We will start providing opportunities. And then I can come forward and say, Rennie, I have a problem. And this is my problem. And I am sorry if in all of my life, I have looked at you as a Black woman and judged you and discriminated against you because of the color of your skin and because of my perception of who I think you are and what I think you should be. We have to begin from that perspective.
Right.
Because we did not come into this organically. The colonial masters came in and told us, they brought us from Africa and India and told us this is how we must be. And so we adapted that as a way to fit in. Are you with me?
I'm with you.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much. We're moving along. So in tallying a bag of citrus fruits, 10-year-old Nigel finds that there are 32 oranges and 33 tangerines. This means there is one more tangerine than oranges. So tangerines make up the majority. How would you ever explain your argument regarding Guyana's 2018 no confidence vote to 10-year-old Nigel?
The no confidence vote to a 10-year-old child. The first challenge you would face, or I would have faced, trying to explain to a 10-year-old child, is what does the Constitution say about no confidence votes and majorities?
Right.
And that you have.
We're talking about a curious 10-year-old like yourself like you would have been.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're asking me about oranges and tangerines to a 10-year-old child. So I would say when you add 32 oranges and 35, what was 32 and what's it? 33, what was the other?
33, tangerines.
Tangerines, and what's the other one? Oranges and tangerines?
Yes, oranges and tangerines.
Right.
32 oranges.
Right. You end up with 65. And I would say to you, what is the half of 65? And I said, can you, and you can't tell me what the half of 65 is without cutting one fruit in half. And when you get the half, the question is, what is the majority? You can't cut the tangerine in half because you got 33.
Right. Okay.
So it's got to be half plus one, right?
My God, I think the common interest Nigel would have done that. When I'm going to our resident mathematician, where is we? Yes, Dr. Blackwood, help us out there.
No, I answered this question for the people in Guyana and for the people. I actually met some of the lawyers who were involved with this. And look, I'm a mathematician. I'm not a lawyer. If there's 65 things in the bag, and you ask me what the majority is, mathematicians define the majority as 33. I mean, there's no question about it. There's no way. I mean, you would be confusing that 10-year-old kid if you tried to tell them something else. It's constitutional law, and that's an entirely different thing. But if you ask them what a simple majority is, 33 is a majority of 65. I think the deeper question is, and it goes to the question that you just raised, it's a question about race. And the deeper question, and it goes to the question that you started the program with, it's a question about what is in the head of Guyanese people. And what's in our head is that, there are whole sets of things going on. One, which at the level of race, I mean, we can soft put it, but at root, there is a kind of competition between ethnic groups for power in the society. And this competition comes from many of the things that we just described. 200 years of slavery, some other years of indentureship, the colonization that, colonizers putting people against each other. So we come up in a place where in a very real way, the spoils of the society go to the political winners. And we don't have we're not as intermixed as some of our Caribbean neighbors. So our political parties, unfortunately, map exactly onto our sort of racial groups, or the two dominant racial groups. And so our politics, and in some sense, our life becomes a sort of fight for supremacy. And in that fight for supremacy, people say things. But I'm a mathematician, so I have to tell you the truth. If you give me 65 and you ask me to ask what is the majority of 65, it's 33. There's no way to, this argument might be an argument for court, but in normal life, this is, and I think for me the deep question when this business occurred was to sort of really ask the question that you're asking now, in the deep mind. What is it that, if the shoe was on the other foot, we would have had exactly the same thing. And the thing is to sort of ask, well, why is it that what do we need to do to get past this sort of ethnic insecurity that people feel, so that this easy transition of government from one to another by way of some numerical majority is something that we can do? I think what we have to admit now is that we can't do that effectively at this moment. And we have to think through what are some, in a way, confidence building ways to bring ourselves to that place where we can, look, I think we just had a lot of counting in the most recent past, right? We had an election, we couldn't figure out exactly what the count was. And then there were lots of issues with counting. I mean, so it's not counting, trust me. All of those people know how to count. So it's not a question of counting. It's a question of the implications of the count, and how we manage the implications of the count to ensure that we all still have a place in it. And so, I think that's the issue. So, it was, I think, unfortunate that we spent all this time in the court trying to resolve a matter that I could have resolved very quickly for everyone. The only issue, I can't resolve the implications of that matter easily for everyone, and I understand that. And so I wouldn't suggest that. I wouldn't suggest that there, folks are wrong in pursuing. I mean, look, if we sat down and watched, this question went all of the way to the Caribbean Supreme Court, right? I mean, it went through all sorts of court cases, and finally, that didn't happen just by happenstance. It happens because, there's a power dynamic playing out, and we have to understand that power dynamic is linked to our deep history. There's no way to escape that. And I think that this is the question about race. You have to have, what are the first steps that we have to do in order to address? I think the first step is, someone made a comment that it's about education. We have to understand how the period of slavery, the period of indentureship, the role that the colonizer class played in setting these two groups apart, the way in which our history has evolved, which sort of led to, initially, I mean, you had a People's Progressive Party in which all groups were a part of, and then a kind of break away from the previous along these racial lines. So we can't, I think this is the thing that maybe I'm glad you asked me this question. I'm glad this moment. Guyana's got to figure out, we've got to figure out how to mature, how to be adults, and it's not easy. I'm not saying that it's easy. We just had here in the United States a somewhat less than adult president who didn't want to go, and they almost broke the whole place up. So this is not unique to Guyana. And in Guyana, in a way, the stakes are much higher because the various parties represent different ethnic groups, and it's a winner-take-all game. If you have 51 and I have 49, you get everything and I get nothing. And so this is the game that we're playing. This is why one would really seriously question, at the level of the courts, whether or not 33 is a majority of 65. But I submit that, that's really not the question. Everyone knows the answer to that question.
Right.
All the people know the answer to that question.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Black.
Yeah. I wouldn't get into any trouble,
but you have
but as a mathematician, I have to say, actually, can I share a funny story? So at the same time, there's a college in North Carolina, which I was having a discussion with the provost or the dean, and so it came up that I was from Guyana, and it came up exactly at this moment, and so I'm sitting there, and we're having a conversation, and I'm trying not to say anything. And then in the moment, the guy says, well, I was a part of the Carter thing in 1992. And the guy knew every single detail about all of the issues there. So I think also we collectively here who live in a somewhat bigger world, we too have a responsibility in a way to not allow ourselves to be sort of imprisoned by our home. In a way, it's a kind of prison. It can trap you into doing things that you fundamentally are not the appropriate ones, and to really force our folks to ask the kinds of questions that need to be asked, which is, how do we get beyond the ethnic insecurity? What are the things that we know that's what's driving it? It's not as if we don't know what's driving it. We know what's driving it, and how to be honest and have a conversation about that. Maybe the last thing I'll say is that all of the people there need to understand Guyana will, for the foreseeable future, be populated by a significant part of its population will be Afro-Guyanese. A significant part of its population will be Indo-Guyanese. A significant part of its population will be indigenous folks. And so it's not like any one of these groups can wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm going to be here by myself. Mm-hmm. That's not happening. And the faster we get with that reality and understand that we have to live with each other and we have to have some real rules for living with each other, then I think we'll be all better off.
All right. I know this issue is a mouthful, so
yeah,
we
it's a challenge, but I think it has to be
we
said. You know, you shouldn't shy away from saying it. I mean, you should
right,
not.
right.
Yeah, you know, sometimes when you don't say it, you're complicit, right? Yeah, when you don't say it, you kind of understand that in a way you're too timid to actually say it because you fear the wrath
Right,
of the people around you. You know, it's like
right,
if you stretch your hand too far out, you can get wrapped on your knuckles, and when you get wrapped on your knuckles a few times, you pull it back in and you say, "Look, I have to decide where I am, and I better decide that I'm here and not there." Right? But I think if we're here, we don't have to worry about that. We can say things, and maybe it might be helpful for all to kind of hear that.
All right.
That they don't have to do that.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. We're at the eighth question, and the eighth question in this series will always be a unique, a creative question, and one that is very open for interpretation. All right. So the idea here is just to see where the Guyanese mind goes on hearing this question. How does the Guyanese mind respond? So what I'll do, I'll first play the question all on its own, and then I will go to each member of the panel, and you give me your response, and the response has to be more than just a phrase or a sentence. All right, and then we will listen to Nigel's response and discuss it. So here is the eighth question. Question 8. Where did you put it?
Where did I put it?
Where did you put it?
Where did I put what?
Exactly. Antoine, where did you put it?
It's funny.
Do 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 do.
Antoine, all right.
Oh, sorry. My mic was on mute, and I was saying to myself, "It's a good thing you got paid for dead air." What is it? Where did I put what? And how do I define what it is? It is a third subject in a conjugation. It could refer to any number of things. And it depends on the circumstances and the conditions that would require me to put, which is an active verb, put something somewhere. So what is it?
All right. Terence, where did you put it?
Well, you see, when you said that for no particular reason at all, I just responded, I put it in the fridge. So I don't know why I thought that, but that's exactly what I thought. So whatever it is in the fridge.
Whatever it is.
I just wanted to put it on ice. Who knows? Make it cold. I'm thinking of beer. Yeah. But that was my response.
No, because if my mother asked me, where do you put it? I'm like, what is it?
Yeah.
Michelle, where did you put it?
So I'm going to define it as my Guyanese culture, because that's what we're discussing right now. And I've put it aside somewhat. I have become more open to new ideas, new ideals, new things, new ways of being and thinking. And I have, so I've put part of it away and I've kept a part of it for myself because I felt that part was very important to me and it would serve me in good stead to help me to really embrace cultures, people, understand life differently and really, understand what joy is and what well-being is.
Okay, thank you. Renita, where did you put it?
I put it in the cloud to retrieve it on a future date and apply it wherever it needs to be applied.
Okay, thank you. All right, now let's listen to Nigel's response. Question 8. Where did you put it?
Where did I put it?
Where did you put it?
Where did I put what?
Exactly. That's for you to decide.
I'm really stumped by this one because where did you put it? Obviously ask the question, what is the it? Is it where you put your soul? Is it where you put your life savings? Is it where you put your hopes, your aspirations? Is it where you put, where you put all your hopes? Where do you put your fears? Where do you put your insecurities? Where do you put your innermost secrets? So that when you go, they may or may not be found. Where do you put it? And or where did you put it? And if it's your soul, you want to be able to make sure that you can find it after you've put it somewhere. So if you've taken your soul out or sold your soul, you want to know where it's been put. And the soul, I think, is perhaps, depending on what your religious views are or personal views are, is perhaps all that you will have after you're gone. And so you want to make sure at least you protect that soul that you have, and you put it somewhere where it will grow, it will nurture, and if it's a beautiful soul, it will develop into something really special that can touch other souls and other people and positively impact their lives.
All right. And Anton, as you listen to his train of thought, as he's bringing down, do you hear an attorney at law? Do you hear a politician? Do you hear a philosopher? What do you hear as you listen to his train of thought?
I just heard him meandering all over trying to understand what it is. But what I also heard is that he was dabbling a bit in metaphysics and maybe in the spiritual realm, in the religious realm, dabbling a bit in psychotherapy and psychology with fears and hopes and so forth. Hope by its very nature and construct is a religious construct. So, but I still am firm in the actual part where he said it depends on the circumstances and the situations. He kind of said some of what I was saying earlier, that the it, where you put the it, is relative to all the other things that are going on around you. And what that it is for this moment undefined.
Okay, good. Rennie, your take on Nigel's response?
I think he covered, it wasn't a political, it wasn't from a politician, it wasn't from an attorney point of view, it was from just a regular human perspective, where he talked about the Christianity, the soul, divinity, everything in one. And he said he'll put it in a place, like if he needs to retrieve it at a later date, it is retrievable and could be built upon and improved upon. So when I heard his answer, I smiled and I said, oh, so me putting it in the cloud, when I define whatever the it is, I could pull it down in the cloud and attach any one of those things, including Antoine's, including Michelle's, including Terrence, to it. So I think normally when you guys ask questions, I always try to say, let me take a answer that you could build upon positively. So his response made me smile because you didn't tell us what the it was. You left us all to to build upon what we think that it is and come up with a definition. So I kind of like his response because we didn't see a profession. We see a person respond to something.
Got that. Your take on his response, Michelle?
I tend to agree with Rennie. I felt it was a very open response. But for the viewing Guyanese public, I would like to say that I like the fact that he touched on the importance of the soul, because that's where my thinking is. We grew up in a society where we were taught to revere people based on things and qualifications and what their last name was and all this type of nonsense. And then we die. And when you die, the only thing anyone remembers of you is your soul, is what you brought to the table as a person, your humanity, how you shared love, who were you? Were you evil? Were you a person of servitude? Were you an honorable person? Did you have integrity? Not integrity is defined by all those laws, but who were you? Were you an open, honest person, who shared love and that's what people remember. People don't really care what car you drive, don't really care whether you were a doctor, lawyer, had a doctorate, how much money you were making. I mean, when they use those things, they use it in a different way. Like, oh, they had enough money, but look how they die. Look what end up with them. And so as we go through this life, we should consider the different parts of our life. So, your body, mind, and soul, and how you bring them together and how you utilize them so that when it's only our soul that is left, will be a good message.
If I may say, Michelle made me remember this saying that I always see. People may not remember what you did and what you drove and how you lived, but they will always remember how you made them feel. So when she made that comment, she made me remember that. And if one of the things, like she said, when you leave this world, you don't ever want people to remember you being evil, vindictive, vengeful. You should leave. When people think about you, they should smile, and smile because it was of positive thoughts, not of, the number of zeros behind your paycheck or what you drove or where you lived, your zip code, etc.
Right. You should be intentionally you, right? So this is who you are. So therefore, I'm not going to try to be Renita or Antoine. I can't be that person. Who am I? If I disagree with something, I can disagree with it. I can speak honestly about how you feel, And I think even when we go back to our culture and we think about the divisions in our culture, what we need to really understand is where this is coming from. Where is it coming from? Who are we living through? Our ancestors or our own experience? Are we living through what we believe indeed? Or are we living through somebody else's experience?
Okay, great point. Thank you. Your take on Nigel's response, Dr. Blackman?
So I was going to have a take on. So I wanted to put all of these things together in the following way, and I'll make a
Okay.
So it's a joke on the end, but it's a serious joke, right? So you asked where did it put it, and so for me the first thought is I put it in the fridge, and I just said that, and then I listened to Dr. Loire and Charles. She said, well, she defined it as Guyanese culture, and she said, well, she put it aside for new ways of thinking. She kept a part for herself to sort of facilitate, embrace life culture, right? And then I listened to Rennie Ann, and she said, she put it in the cloud so that she can retrieve it. And then we listened to, and he said, well, you know, it could be like life savings where you put it up somewhere, or your fears where you put this, or your insecurities. And then, you know, the longer sort of discussion around, you know, one's kind of soul and what, you know, the legacy that we leave. And, you know, it struck me that I thought all of these answers, maybe this is the answer to your question about Guyanese culture at the very beginning, because what I noted was we all, when you said, where did you put it?
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the pattern of the responses that we give, all our responses are in terms of, like, when we put it, we're hiding something someplace, right? You see, and maybe that's the essential character, right? It's not, it's you know, like, we didn't say, why, I just rest in the street right there. You know, or, you know, we didn't say, look at that right there, sit down there right on the table in front of everybody. So where you put it, we immediately had a kind of, in this way, we all went to put in a place of secrecy. We didn't put in an open place. And so I thought to myself, you know, that's the answer to your question. You know, what is the Guyanese psyche is exactly that. It's exactly, there's always something where you're putting something someplace in some secret hole that later you will maybe come back to, maybe not come back to. No one will know. Two people will know. And I say that jokingly, but seriously, but it's reflected in the data that we just had in this small experiment. You just asked, where did you put it? Almost every answer that we gave had to do with putting something someplace hidden, not in the open. And so maybe that's our Guyanese characteristic. We hide things. We're like squirrels. We save nuts and put them around.
All right, thank you so much for that, Dr. Blackman. All right, Antoine, could you give us, like, you know, what are a few psychological points we can draw from just this evening's discussion, and then Yan will close us out.
I think one of the things that I'm learning from this evening's discussion and interview with Nigel is, and calls for, a greater sense of reflection about who we are and where we're coming from and where potentially we could be going. What does our future look like? As Guyanese at home in Guyana, and Guyanese in the diaspora. What does our future look like? And I think this final question, where did you put it question, and again, how Dr. Blackman, how Michelle, how Renian, even how Nigel responded, how we all answered it, gives a sense of how we think about our lives, ourselves, but how we also think about others and the lives that we live and the things that we do. Where do we put things? How do we manage things? How do we manage life around us? But one of the things that jumped out to me just now about all of this is, as Michelle was saying, where is it all coming from? And in the earlier conversation, we also raised the issue about how colonialism still influences Guyanese. And then you have, and I will continue to talk about this, raise the issue of addressing our intergenerational traumas and how they continue to impact our lives and our behaviors today. So where do we put it? Is what is, again, my question is, what is the it? Because in the it for Guyanese, there are so many different things that we can label as an it. And looking at the trajectory of the conversation this evening is, how do we reconcile any of those issues? How many of those issues in our lives as Guyanese, whether at home or in the diaspora, can we combine into one? Or do we need to further separate, to dissemble, to further examine, to find a resolution, to find some understanding, to find some meaning? What is the it? What are the many different things in our lives that cause us to be the way we are? And Michelle raised that just now. And when she talked about putting things aside, my mind was like, I was about to jump in and interrupt and say, is we trying to hide? Is we putting aside? But I was like, let me keep quiet for a minute and just listen to where she's going with this one here. But you understand what I'm saying? And like Dr. Blackman is saying, that there may be also a concept in the Guyanese culture of hiding, of always putting away. How many of us can remember some of our older folk, and maybe some of us still do it today, where we will sit down on the edge of the bed and we will fold clothes and put away clothes, like we would spend whole day into night folding and put away clothes. And we always hiding things. We always putting things away. But we can't find them when we're looking for them. But that's another conversation. And so that kind of asks the question, should we interrogate and say, well, why is it we have a tendency to hide? But is it just hiding physical things? Michelle was talking to some about putting things aside and so forth. But watch this. Have we considered how much do we hide in ourselves, from ourselves, and from each other? And when we hide from ourselves and hide in ourselves, who are we deceiving? Are we continuing to perpetuate a life of deception and deceit when we are continually hiding and putting away because we don't want to face certain things, or we don't want to address certain things with other people? So we would put it away, we would hide it, we would avoid it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Tremendous amount of sense.
Okay, thank you for those closing remarks, Antoine. Renita, you could close us out. It's been a very, very interesting evening.
Yes. So I just want to start again with thanking the attorney at law, Nigel Hughes, for giving us some of his time, sharing his thoughts and insights with us. As usual, we want to thank the viewers who spent some of their Friday night with us, sharing questions, giving their comments, and my esteemed panelists for being their authentic selves and giving their view. I just want to close by saying we should always remember it is not what a person has or what they dress or how they dress or where they live, their zip code, their bank account, but ultimately how they treat others, how their characters, what their characters are like, how they make others feel. And we should all make an effort to make others feel that their lives matter, regardless of who they are, how big they are, how important they may be perceived, and whatever choice they want to make. Make them feel that they matter. Because in the end, people will always remember how you as a person made them feel. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Renita. Good night. Thank you all for joining us, and for those who will be joining us after the live, welcome aboard, and do join us again next Friday for another edition of the 8 Questions on the Trending Mind.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What is knowledge? And how much of it must we acquire in order to better our lives? What makes some forms of knowledge seemingly more advantageous than others? What fuels this desire to learn and to know and to understand? And how much of what we learn is actually applied to the bettering of our lives? Is it necessary to know in order to grow? Join us, a group of former Guyanese high schoolers and our special guests, as we chat about the things we need to know and about education and the process of learning in the tech age. This is The Trending Mind, Friday evenings at 7:30